Hello, and welcome to another installment of Beauty Biography. I'm Ashley, and today we are going to be talking about one of the most beautiful and glamorous women that ever walked this earth, Dame Elizabeth Taylor. While we chat about her incredibly full life, I will be doing this Elizabeth Taylor inspired makeup look. Before we start discussing Elizabeth's life, if you would give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Both are completely free and they really help my channel out a lot. All right, let's get into it. Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor is born on February 27th, 1932. So she is a Pisces, which as a Cancer, I have like a soft spot for Pisces. I think they're like my, like water sign, less emotional cousin almost to my Cancer. Pisces, again, much like Cancer, are sometimes known for being serial monogamous. And if you know anything about Elizabeth Taylor, you know that in her case, this is definitely going to turn out to be one of those horoscope-like things that is true. Elizabeth is born in London, and she is born a dual citizen. So she is a citizen of both the United Kingdom as well as the United States of America, because both of her parents are Americans who have moved to London, and they're both from Arkansas City, Kansas. That kind of astounded me. I just I think of Elizabeth Taylor as like the epitome of like glamour and I don't know, just like jet setting and global. And the fact that her parents are from Arkansas City, Kansas, I was kind of shocked. No offense if you're from Arkansas City, Kansas. I'm from the middle of nowhere in North Carolina, so I'm definitely not judging you. I just think that was shocking to me. I really didn't know that. Elizabeth's mother, Sarah Southern, is a retired actress, and her father, Francis, owns an art gallery. They already have one child when Elizabeth is born, her older brother, Howard. The art gallery that Elizabeth's father, Francis, owns is like a very high society kind of art gallery. Not that there are any like low society art galleries, but you get what I'm saying. They cater to like influential politicians, very famous artists. So her family is definitely part of like a very high society type crowd. They are very connected in London. Elizabeth attends a Montessori school in London in the very affluent suburb of Highgate. I mean, I hear about Highgate, I think from like royal stuff. I don't know if the royals spend some time there, or maybe, like Little George, maybe that's where he goes to school. I'm not sure. I just know that I've definitely heard of Highgate, and it has a very affluent reputation. Now, when Elizabeth is 7 years old, her family decides to move back to the United States of America. It's 1939, and if we all have brushed up on our world history lately, we know what's getting ready to come up. World War II. So Joseph P. Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy family, JFK's father, he is friends with Francis, and he calls Francis and he's like, listen, you should probably get back to the United States of America with your family, because there is definitely going to be a war in Europe. It's coming. So in April 1939, Elizabeth and her brother Howard get on the ship the SS Manhattan with their mother, and they relocate to California. Their dad, he has to stay in England. He closes up the art gallery, and he comes later in December. Once her father Francis gets there, they settle in Beverly Hills, of course, because again, Elizabeth came from, her family was high class to begin with. She has always been high class from the day she was born. So now that the family is living in Beverly Hills, people come up to Elizabeth's mother all the time and tell them, you know what? Elizabeth is so beautiful. You have got to get her into acting. She is gorgeous. And Elizabeth's mom is kind of against this at first. But, once she kind of sees what's going on with the war and yes, this is a big war, World War II, she realizes, you know what, we're probably not going to get to move back to London anytime soon. So maybe this would be a good way for Elizabeth to assimilate into American culture. Which, I don't know, if you want to assimilate, you could just get your child a Happy Meal at McDonald's or something. And let them watch some Howdy Doody. I don't know, what was the Sesame Street of that time? I'm not sure. I'm just saying, I feel like there are other ways to assimilate, but you do you, Sarah, you do you. Now, Elizabeth is a gorgeous child. She has these blue eyes that are so blue that they appear almost violet. Now, I saw like a lot of different accounts of this because I did quite a bit of research on Elizabeth, and some people say no, her eyes weren't violet, but most people say they were definitely very, very blue, and it could sometimes appear like they were very violet, depending on what she was wearing and kind of like the colors she put around them. You'll notice a lot when she gets older, she puts like gray eyeshadow on quite a bit, and that kind of plays up the violet tone of them a little bit. So she definitely had just piercingly gorgeous blue eyes. And she also had these crazy full eyelashes. Now, if you watch like any biography, read any book on Elizabeth Taylor, they're gonna say, she has this genetic mutation where she has 2 rows of eyelashes. And that was so confusing to me. I kept reading, she, has 2 rows of eyelashes, and I'm thinking, I know that my eyelashes, I have more than one like straight row of them. Most people do, like everyone does. And so I was like, I need to know what's actually going on here with this eyelash situation. So I looked into it, and it turns out what it actually is it's that, you have your regular eyelashes, and most of our eyelashes are on the lid. That's what all of us have there on the lash line. But for Elizabeth, she had some in the waterline, like what we call the waterline. She had lashes going out of the waterline on the top and on the bottom, which sounds great, like having extra lashes. But then at the same time, can you imagine having lashes like out of your waterline? It could be kind of uncomfortable. So by 1941, Elizabeth's parents have opened a new gallery in Beverly Hills, and they've got super high-end clients yet again. Not much has changed. And a lot of these clients are like movie types, people that are in the film industry. So they decide, all right, we're gonna let Elizabeth audition to maybe join with one of the studios. Elizabeth is 9 years old, and her parents get her an audition with MGM and an audition with Universal. Both companies end up being like, yes, we want her to come into our star system, which I might do a separate video one day on the star system. Basically, what you need to know is back in this time around Hollywood, studios would find talent, sign them, and basically like try to build up their persona and their catalog and try to like make them into stars. It was like a whole system that they had where they would just like basically shape people into the movie star they wanted them to be. It wasn't like the idea we have now of like getting discovered or anything like that. It was like, no, they would find people, sign them, and then try to like mold them into what they wanted. So Sarah and Francis, Elizabeth's parents, decide we're going to accept Universal's offer. Elizabeth's first role is a small role in a movie called There's One Born Every Minute. And after that, Universal cancels her contract. They think that she looks too mature. She doesn't really match the child stars, the look that they have around this time. The big child stars at this time are Shirley Temple, Judy Garland, and Elizabeth. Just to these studio people, they think she looks more mature, and they're like, this just isn't working out. So this is going to be the end of the road for Universal Pictures and Elizabeth Taylor, which, big mistake, Universal Pictures, big mistake, huge. You really screwed up. So the next year in 1942, Elizabeth's father has a friend who works with MGM, and he tells Elizabeth's father, Francis, we need a child that has a British accent for a few different films. You should have Elizabeth come back and audition again. So Elizabeth's father says, yes, we're going to have her go audition again. So Elizabeth goes and auditions with MGM yet again, and this goes really well. MGM gives Elizabeth a 7-year contract, which, what's funny is when I was doing the Rita Hayworth beauty biography, 7-year contracts were like a big thing. And so is 7, like that was what they did. They liked the number 7. I wonder if there's rhyme or reason to that, or if some guy at MGM was just like, 7 is my lucky number. We're just going to keep giving out 7-year contracts. Elizabeth appears in a few minor roles, and then when she's 12 years old, she gets the role that is going to launch her career, National Velvet. As a child who grew up with horses, National Velvet is like, it's so classic. It is one of the films that shaped baby Ashley, and Elizabeth felt the same. She would actually later say multiple times in multiple interviews that National Velvet was her favorite film that she ever made. It was the most exciting role she ever had. She just absolutely loved it. I was actually watching an interview that she did with Barbara Walters. I was watching that this morning, and she said that she actually got to pick the horse that she rode in National Velvet, which is So cool. Now, Elizabeth lands this part, but the studio decides she's just a little too short still. So they postpone filming for about 6 months to give Elizabeth time to grow a little taller. Elizabeth uses this time to practice her writing, she gets braces, and she also has to have a couple baby teeth pulled out. The studio actually wanted her to dye her hair during this time and change her name to Virginia, but Elizabeth's mother, Sarah, is a good mom. And she's like, no, you are not dyeing my 12-year-old's hair and you are not changing my 12-year-old's name. I gave her the name Elizabeth. I gave birth to her. Her name's going to be Elizabeth. I would be livid if someone told me like, oh, I think you should change your child's name. No. National Velvet is released on Christmas Day, 1944, and it is an immediate huge hit, and Elizabeth is an immediate star. Not only is National Velvet a box office success, it's also a critical success. Critics love the movie. They love Elizabeth's performance. My favorite review I read was from a critic named James Agee, and he said, Taylor is rapturously beautiful. I hardly know or care if she can act or not, which, I mean, she's 12, so it's a little weird that he thinks she's so beautiful. I mean, she was a beautiful child, but I think it's funny that he's like, I don't care if she can act or not. She's just a beautiful child that I like to look at. Still a little weird. Yeah, a little weird. Because National Velvet is so successful, MGM decides, you know what? We want to sign you right now to another 7-year contract. Let's renegotiate so we can extend your contract, and we're going to give you $750 a week. And you know what? A lot of people right now today would be like, yeah, $750 a week. That's great. All right. Just so you know, $750 back then in 1944, today is almost $11,000 a week. She's 12 years old and she has a contract to make almost $11,000 a week. Whoa. Now, despite the fact that Elizabeth is making quite a bit of money, Elizabeth will later describe that, this is not all golden. She says that her childhood basically ended when she started acting because MGM started controlling everything in her life. They would set up photo shoots for just, anything to shape her public image. I mean, they would set up photo shoots for her first date. Look, Elizabeth's going on a first date. We're going to do a photo shoot. They even published this book that was letters that Elizabeth had written to her hamster, her pet hamster. Why do I say hamster? There's no P in hamster, but I say it like there is. So as Elizabeth turns 14, MGM decides to start portraying her like she's a little, more mature. So they're taking photos of her first dates. Here's Elizabeth going to parties. And it's around this time that all the gossip magazines and columns in the newspapers are going to start to compare Elizabeth to actresses that are a lot older than her, like Ava Gardner and Lana Turner, who are both over 10 years older than Elizabeth. Now, as soon as Elizabeth turns 18, they're like, all right, we're going for mature roles. They put her in this movie called Conspirator that she actually filmed when she was 16. They didn't release it until she was 18, but it was filmed when she was 16 years old, in which she plays a woman who suspects her husband of being a Soviet spy. She's 16 years old playing a woman that has a husband, which is just shocking to me. Now, in May of 1950, Elizabeth marries Conrad Hilton. She is 18 years old and he is 24 years old. Her wedding ceremony is actually organized and publicized by MGM to promote Elizabeth's next movie, Father of the Bride, which I didn't realize. I mean, I feel a little silly about this. Nobody make fun of me. I didn't realize that Father of the Bride was a remake, the Steve Martin, Kimberly Williams version. Totally a remake. I had no idea. And I feel a little foolish now that I didn't know that that was just a remake. Father of the Bride is a huge box office success, and it becomes the first in a string of films that are going to be very successful for Elizabeth. Now, things moved a lot faster in Hollywood back then. So over the next 3 years, Elizabeth stars in 6 films. So that's warp speed by today's filmmaking standards. Now, in this 3-year span, a lot also happens in Elizabeth's personal life. She divorces Conrad after I think like 8 months of marriage because apparently he's a heavy drinker and kind of abusive. Also, he's like the great uncle of Paris and E. Hilton, which is kind of cool. I didn't really realize how young she was when she first got married. I mean, this marriage, had only been 18 for 3 months, and this guy was abusive and a heavy drinker. Like, it's a great thing that she didn't stay with him. So, later on we'll talk about the fact that the media makes a ton of fuss and kick up about Elizabeth's personal life, but I mean, some of these marriages happen when she's just a baby. So in February of 1952, Elizabeth's career is going fabulously, and she marries her second husband, a British actor named Michael Wilding. There's 20 years between them, and Elizabeth will actually later say that this really drew her to him because she felt like being with someone that much older than her was going to give her security and like a very steady relationship that was going to have, more of a friendship to it than feeling tumultuous. And for Michael, he apparently felt like, marrying Elizabeth is going to help kind of, revitalize my career, which it doesn't. And later, the fact that she's super successful and he's not as successful is going to kind of become like a sticking point in their marriage. Now, in 1953, Elizabeth's original contract, the one she has like for $750 a week, that contract has now run out. So MGM is trying to negotiate with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is actually pregnant with her first child at this point. So she's trying to get these negotiations wrapped up to provide some security for her, growing family. And in the end, the agreement is another 7-year contract with MGM. MGM will buy a house for her husband and her, and they're going to give her $4,700 a week, which, wait for it, is $46,000 a week, or $2.39 million a year in 2020 money. That could buy you all the toilet paper you need. So Elizabeth and Michael will have 2 children together. They will have Michael Howard, born in 1953, which Michael is her husband's name, Howard is her older brother's name, and then Christopher Edward, born in 1955. Now, Elizabeth wanted, the security of being married to someone older, and Michael had wanted, to be more successful in his career, and he thought maybe being married to, this young rising starlet was going to do that. It didn't. He's quite bitter about the fact that she is so much more successful than he is, and this causes a lot of tension in the marriage. The final straw is Elizabeth is away in the summer of 1956 filming a movie called Giant, and during that time, the gossip columns report that Michael has entertained exotic dancers in their home. So yeah, Elizabeth's done with this now. No thank you. How dare you? So they separate in July of 1956. Their divorce is made final in January of 1957. And then on February 2nd, 1957, Elizabeth marries her third husband, film producer Mike Todd. Elizabeth is about 3 months pregnant with their daughter, Liza Frances, when they get married, which, fun fact, I knew right off the top of my head because Liza Frances is born on August 6th, and that was actually the due date of my daughter. So I knew it was on February I was about 3 months pregnant. So that's a very cool thing to have in common with Elizabeth Taylor. We had very similar dates in our pregnancies with our firstborn daughters. So I feel like a kinship to her now. I'm basically just as glamorous as Elizabeth. Mike Todd is a film producer, and he really encourages all the public attention that is put onto his marriage with Elizabeth. He loves publicity stunts. He even throws himself a birthday party. Yes, himself. He throws himself a birthday party at Madison Square Garden that has over 18,000 guests. 18,000. I could not find 18,000 people to attend my birthday party if I gave out free tickets on the street. There's no way. And the birthday party is also broadcast on CBS. While married to Mike, Elizabeth begins production on one of the highlights of her career. It is the film adaptation of Tennessee Williams' play Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. But 2 weeks into filming, Mike is killed in a plane crash. Elizabeth is obviously devastated. She only ends up getting 3 weeks off to grieve, which if your husband died, like 3 weeks off, like that's it, and then you have to go back to acting. Terrible. But Elizabeth will later say that, after his death, probably for like the next couple years, the only time she could really function was when she was acting. That's the only time she felt like she was like a functioning human being. I can't relate to acting, but I can relate to, sometimes not feeling like a functioning human being. That's awful. So while filming Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Elizabeth begins an affair with Eddie Fisher, and this is going to be a pivotal point in kind of how she is perceived. While affairs are generally private matters between adults, unfortunately, this one does not stay a private matter. It becomes quite public. Eddie Fisher is married to Debbie Reynolds at the time, and they are America's sweethearts. Like, they are just the sweet, golden, like, high school sweetheart couple of the United States of America. They are 1950s icons, and they are also the parents of Carrie Fisher. Fun fact. When the public learns of this affair, they immediately, the public, the media, they brand Elizabeth as a homewrecker, which Elizabeth is a widow. Okay, she's a widow. Eddie Fisher is the one that was married. So why aren't we mad at Eddie Fisher? Which I guess some people were. But still, I think we should be more mad at Eddie Fisher than we're mad at Elizabeth Taylor. Anyway, MGM decides, we're going to capitalize on this whole homewrecker thing. And they use a picture of Elizabeth in a negligee posing on a bed as like the poster image for a Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. The drama sells, it really works, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is a huge box office success. It's also a very critical success. People praise Elizabeth's portrayal. She's nominated for a BAFTA and also for an Academy Award. So her personal life, not kind of rocky, but her professional life, she's cleaning up. Now, in 1959, Eddie has left his wife, Debbie Reynolds, and he and Elizabeth marry. Elizabeth will later in life say that she basically married him out of grief. She was just kind of trying to fill basically a void that was left by losing her husband, Mike Todd, and she just married him, I guess, to feel better. That same year, Elizabeth has only one film left in her contract with MGM. And MGM, they decide, all right, it's going to be Butterfield 8. And it's a good decision. The film is actually about a high-class sex worker, which the studio feels like, well, you know what? Everybody in America thinks that she's a homewrecker. So high-class sex worker, sure, sounds great. Elizabeth, funny enough, doesn't like this film for the same reason that MGM likes it for her. She's like, you know what? I'm tired of everyone thinking that I'm a homewrecker. I don't want to be in this role. But ultimately, she doesn't really have any choice. So she does the film. And I'm not going to say good thing that she's forced to do it, because I don't think people should be forced to do things they don't want to do. But the film is a big success. It's a huge success, and it wins her first Academy Award. Around this time, Elizabeth converts from Christian Scientist to Jewish. Now, both Mike Todd and Eddie Fisher are Jewish. So both of her, at this point, her current husband and then her last husband are both Jewish. But Elizabeth will later say that this is not why she chose to convert to Judaism. She will say that she just always felt like she was Jewish. She felt like she was born Jewish and she was meant to be Jewish. And she really felt drawn to kind of just how old and ancient the religion was. Her MGM contract is done, and in 1960, she starts making movies with other people because the star system at this point has pretty much died out. So people are no longer signing like 7-8 year contracts with one studio. Why am I saying 7-8 year? It seems that it's always 7-year contracts, but that's kind of fallen, like that system has kind of fallen by the wayside. So she's now free to make films with, whatever studio has a project that she likes. She has now more freedom to choose what roles she wants to take. So in 1960, Elizabeth begins filming what is going to be a huge pivotal movie in both her career and her personal life. Fox Films' Cleopatra. This film is going to take over 2 years to finally complete. It's going to see Elizabeth become the first actress to ever be paid over $1 million. She's also going to be granted 10% of the film's profits, and it will be shot in something called Todd AO, which is like a filming method or filming aspect ratio that she owns the rights to because she inherited them from her late husband, Mike Todd. Like I said, this film ends up taking over 2 years to make, and that comes down to a couple things. One, there's like a lot of bad weather, and number two, Elizabeth gets very sick while filming. So the most notable sickness she gets while filming is in 1961. In March, she comes down with pneumonia so badly that she ends up needing surgery. It is nearly fatal, and she has to have a tracheotomy, which, if you don't know, I mean, if you're squeamish, like maybe skip ahead 10 seconds, they have to cut a hole in her throat. Because of the pneumonia and the tracheotomy, she misses several months of filming. And by the time she comes back, 20th Century Fox has like scrapped 4 months of filming. They're like, we cannot use any of the footage that we filmed before you were gone. They've moved production of the film from England to Rome. They've replaced the director, and most notably, they have replaced the actor playing Mark Anthony from Stephen Boyd to Richard Burton. That's right, Richard Burton. Dick of Liz and Dick. While filming, Elizabeth and Richard start a love affair that is going to last for decades. They're both married while filming, and there are tons of rumors that something is going on between them. All of these rumors are confirmed when the paparazzi, yes, because paparazzi is an Italian word for a reason. The paparazzi, as we know it, basically originated in Italy. And the paparazzi in 1961, they get some shots of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton canoodling on a yacht off the coast of Italy. Historians will actually later point to this as being kind of a turning point where it started to become a lot more difficult for actors to separate their personal lives from their professional lives. Now, people are extremely outraged by Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor's affair. The Vatican basically calls them out, which I guess because they're filming in Rome, I can't really grasp why else it would be the Vatican's business, because neither of them are Catholic. There's even a couple congressmen in the United States of America that, make calls on the floor of Congress to have Elizabeth and Richard banned from coming back into the United States of America. Which, calm down. What does it have to do with you? Now, despite all the tumultuousness and the production delays and the fact that the film Cleopatra almost bankrupts 20th Century Fox, it becomes the biggest movie of the year 1963. The critical reviews of the movie they're mixed, and in hindsight, should we have had a white woman playing Cleopatra? No, it does not check out historically. Not at all. But there is one thing for sure. The film cements Elizabeth's status as an icon. So immediately following Cleopatra, Richard and Elizabeth star together in a film called The VIPs. And The VIPs is actually a film that's centered around an affair. And the studio is thinking, you know what? People are going to want to watch this because it's got Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, and it's about an affair. So the parallels between art and real life are going to make people be like, yes, I've got to see that. And they are right. People want to go see the movie, and it is, again, another box office hit for Elizabeth. Now, following this film, Elizabeth takes a 2-year break, during which time she and Richard divorce their respective spouses, and they get married for the first time. They become the it couple of Hollywood, and they star in films together over the next few years that gross over $88 million. Many of these films have aspects and plots that kind of reflect their private life. So again, people are really drawn to that parallel between what they're seeing on screen and what they think is going on in this private marriage. One of these is actually the most critically acclaimed of Elizabeth's career. It is the film adaptation of the Edward Albee play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which, if you have never seen that play or that movie, you need to do it. It's awkwardness at its finest. It's such a good film. I love the play. I've seen the play a couple times in different places done by different theater groups. And if it's done well, it's super awkward. If it's not done well, it's just, but this film does it really well. Elizabeth and Dick, or Liz and Dick as they have become known in the public eye, they play a middle-aged couple in this movie that have like a ton of very deep issues. Elizabeth gains a lot of weight to play this role, and she does not look glamorous. She takes this role so seriously. And you know what? Hollywood likes to reward women who gain weight for roles. We see this time and time again. Or like women who make themselves ugly for roles, they get the Oscar. I think of like Charlize Theron in Monster, she won an Oscar for that. And sure enough, Elizabeth wins herself another Oscar for her portrayal. Now, as I just mentioned, Elizabeth and Richard basically become known as Liz and Dick, and the media follows them like incessantly. They are just always in the public eye. There's always story after story about them, about, their lifestyle. They're constantly jetting all over the globe. They have very luxurious taste. He's always buying her like this insane jewelry. There's actually a diamond that Richard buys for Elizabeth. It is a 68 karat Cartier diamond that he has to outbid Aristotle Onassis for. Aristotle Onassis is the husband of Jackie Kennedy Onassis. If you didn't know, Richard Burton outbids him. I think he spends like over $1 million on this diamond, and it becomes known as the Taylor Burton diamond. So yeah, they've got expensive taste. They are living lifestyles of the rich and famous. Stories, claiming that there are affairs going on, and it's really one of the first kind of like Hollywood relationships where we see this just constant, never-ending coverage. Like, they basically paved the way for the stories that we remember from like the early 2000s, where it was just nonstop coverage of like Brad and Gwyneth, then Brad and Jen, and then Brad and Angelina. Now, there's such constant coverage of them that the public kind of just starts to get tired of it. They're like, you know what? I've heard all I want to hear about Elizabeth Taylor and Dick, okay? Like, let's stop talking about it. And after Elizabeth gained the weight for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, she actually had kind of a hard time getting it back off. And she's nearing middle age, so naturally, Hollywood starts to grow a little bit fickle of Elizabeth. The infamous Liz and Dick divorce in 1974, but they decide to give it another try, and they remarry in 1975 in Botswana. But that second try only lasts for 9 months, and their second and final divorce is finalized in July of 1976, the summer of the bicentennial. 5 months later, Elizabeth marries her sixth husband, Republican politician John Warner. He is a politician from Virginia. He's a Republican. He is not yet a senator, so he's running for election, and Elizabeth helps him with his election campaign, and he does get elected to the Senate. He actually ends up being the last Republican senator elected from the state of Virginia to date. Elizabeth has taken a break from acting at this point. She's helping him with his election, and she finds that aspect of things to be very exciting. She's like, oh wow, politics is kind of fun. However, once they're actually, past the election part and they get to the, governing, she doesn't find that to be quite as exciting. She finds life in DC, living with him, quite boring, and she gains quite a bit of weight, and she starts to struggle with depression as well as alcohol and prescription drug addiction. In large part because of this, she and Warner end up divorcing in 1982, and she checks into the Betty Ford Center. She's actually the first celebrity to publicly check into the Betty Ford Center, which is just, very brave, and people just didn't do that back then. They were not public about these struggles. Obviously, these struggles have always existed. There has always been issues with substance abuse and addiction, but people just didn't really talk about it. And she was the first person to be like, a celebrity that openly said, you know what, I need help, and I'm going to go to the Betty Ford Clinic, and I'm going to get help. So go Elizabeth. Elizabeth gets sober at the Betty Ford Center, and in the early to mid 80s, she makes a lot of guest appearances in soap operas. She also begins to start receiving kind of those awards that they start to give people, for like lifetime achievement in Hollywood. So she gets the Cecil B. DeMille Award, which is an award that's given at the Golden Globes. When she receives this award, the Hollywood Foreign Press who gives the award say, quote, "Having made her Hollywood screen debut at age 10, she became part of the world's cinematic royalty," which, yes, she is absolutely cinematic royalty. These brows, though, very difficult to replicate. Anyway, from National Velvet in 1944 to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf in 1966 and beyond. They use these two films, and these two films really are like kind of the bookends to the most successful period in her career. It's that 22-year span between National Velvet and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. She does make appearances in other films and in soap operas, but really those are the bookends to the bulk of the success that she had in her career. Now, in the late 1980s, Elizabeth relapses, and she again checks in to the Betty Ford Center. While there at the Betty Ford Center, she meets a construction worker named Larry Fortensky, who definitely at one point had a curly mullet. And on October 6, 1991, Larry becomes her seventh and final husband. They are married for 5 years before divorcing, but Elizabeth and he will stay friends for the rest of her life. Now, in the 1990s, Elizabeth does appear in a few minor roles. She makes like small cameos in shows like The Nanny and Murphy Brown, but the bulk of her time at this point in her life is dedicated to her HIV and AIDS activism. Elizabeth testifies before the Senate on the subject of HIV and AIDS in 1986, 1990, and 1992, and she is credited with persuading then President Ronald Reagan to publicly acknowledge AIDS for the first time in a speech that he made in 1987. He basically, if you didn't know this about the Reagan administration, they weren't really big fans of talking about AIDS. They really wanted to avoid the subject if they could. For several years, they avoided that subject. And Elizabeth was like, "Listen, Ronald." And they chatted it out, and I don't really know what happened exactly, but he did end up acknowledging AIDS for the first time. She also founds the Elizabeth Taylor Medical Center in Washington, D.C. It offers free HIV/AIDS testing as well as treatment. As a result of her philanthropy, she is honored many times in her life. She is made a Knight of the French Legion of Honor in 1987. She is given the GLAAD Vanguard Award in 2000, and in 2001, she is given the President's Citizens Medal. She's also made a Dame in the year 2000 by Queen Elizabeth II. Elizabeth's final public performance is in 2007, and it is a performance of Love Letters with James Earl Jones that is to benefit HIV/AIDS. Elizabeth struggled with many injuries and illnesses throughout her life. She was someone who was often ill or injured. She had scoliosis, a broken back, hip replacements, a benign brain tumor, skin cancer. She was diagnosed with congestive heart failure in 2004, and she would eventually succumb to this disease on March 23rd, 2011, at the age of 79. Elizabeth's funeral was resided over by a rabbi, and it started 15 minutes late because Elizabeth had told her publicist that she wanted to be fashionably late in death as she was in life. So when I was researching this video, I thought like, okay, how do I sum up the legacy of Elizabeth Taylor at the end of this video? And I mean, it's kind of impossible to do it justice. She was one of like the last, stars of the golden age of Hollywood, as well as one of the first modern stars, like modern celebrities that was like, stalked by the paparazzi and had her personal life like out there for everyone. Her fame extends to basically every corner of the globe, and we often think of her as being just famous because she's Elizabeth Taylor, like famous for being herself, but really, she was an incredibly talented actress despite the fact that she had no professional training, like none. She was not a professionally trained actress. She just freaking figured it out, I guess, because she was very talented. When I was researching her for this video, I actually went back and rewatched Butterfield 8, National Velvet, and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. She is very naturally talented, and she commands attention, period. Like, no matter what, your eye always wants to go to her. She just has like a magnetic draw. But she's more than that. She was super feminine. She was known for these love affairs and jewelry, yet she was also like a feminist icon. So many of her roles had like these strong themes of feminism that it's almost like she brought it to the role. She was an activist, a gay icon, a jewelry collector, a perfume maker, an entrepreneur, a mother. She lived an incredibly full life, and all the power to her for it. I mean, cheers to you, Elizabeth. I want to thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below, who would you like to see featured in the next beauty biography? I hope to see you in my next video. Until then, you take care of yourself. Bye.